Here we're given the sine and cosine of pi over 6, and we're asked to use that to find the sine of pi over 3. Let's first picture pi over 6 on the unit circle. If this were pi over 6, this blue angle, then this point right here represents the cosine and the sine of pi over 6. Remember, the first coordinate, the x-coordinate, is the cosine, and the y-coordinate is the sine. So we're given a formula here in green. This is the double angle formula for sine. This formula is used to find the sine of 2 times some angle. So is pi over 3 2 times double the size of pi over 6? Let's see. Pi over 6 times 2 is 2 pi over 6, which 2/6 is the same as 1/3. So this is 1 pi over 3. So yes, pi over 3 is double the size of pi over 6. So that's why we're using this formula. So our first step is to take our original angle, pi over 6, and we're going to substitute this into the formula everywhere we see an x. And now we're going to simplify. On the left side, we already know from our calculation we just did that 2 times pi over 6 is pi over 3. And then there's nothing on the right side that we can simplify at this point. And then our next step is to substitute in what sine pi over 6 and cosine pi over 6 are. Remember, that's given to us in this first line up here. And before we multiply these fractions together, it's always good to look and see if there's anything that can be simplified. If you see a number that's in the numerator, that's also in the denominator, you can cancel it out because this is saying 2 divided by 2, which is 1. So all we're left with in the numerator is 1 times square root of 3, and in the denominator we have a 2. So at this point we have determined the sine of pi over 3. Let's draw that on our unit circle. And on the next slide, we're going to go through a similar process to find the cosine of this angle, pi over 3. So here we're presented with the same information, but asked to use it to find the cosine of pi over 3. And we're given the double angle formula for cosine. Just like with sine, our first step is to take the original angle, we're referring to it as x, and substitute it into our formula everywhere we see x. And I'm going to simplify the left side again. Remember, 2 times pi over 6 is pi over 3. Now, before I substitute in what the sine of pi over 6 and the cosine of pi over 6 are into this formula, I'm first going to split up this square. I'm going to split this cosine pi over 6 squared into cosine pi over 6 times cosine of pi over 6, because that's what squaring means. It means you're multiplying it by itself twice. And the same with the sine squared. I'm going to split that out into a multiplication problem as well. Now let's substitute in what we know the cosine of pi over 6 and the sine of pi over 6 are into this equation everywhere we see that. Now, before we subtract here, we need to multiply each of these sets of fractions. Remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you just multiply the top and the bottom, the numerator and the denominator. In the first one, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, I'm going to put this over here on the side. When you do this, it becomes the square root of 3 times 3, which, remember, the square root symbol is saying, what's being squared? Well, 3 is being squared. So when we multiply our numerators, we just get 3. In our denominator, 2 times 2 is 4. Now let's do the same for the second set of fractions. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. And then the last step is to just subtract. When we're subtracting or adding fractions, the denominator needs to be the same, which it is. And so we leave the denominator as 4, and then we subtract our numerators. 3 minus 1 is 2. And 2/4 is the same as 1/2 or 0.5.